Hello, everyone. Welcome to Business Mastery Secrets Facebook group. I am doing the live webinar today, and it's all around how you can save time and money this end of financial year. So I know it's nearly here. It's the 18th of May today. Can you believe it? So it's only like 6 weeks maximum till 30 June. And as accountants, I'm an accountant. It is one of the most exciting nights, 30th of June. Not for everyone, I know, but as an accountant, I do love end of financial year. So I wanted to share with you because you've got 6 weeks to prepare now, and really you need to start preparing now to help you save time and money at the end of financial year. So whether that's saving money on tax, like on your tax bills, or actually being able to put in place some really great tax strategies to help you minimize legally your tax that you have to pay, or making sure that you've got all of your documents and everything prepared for your accountant so that you don't have as higher accounting fees, because time is money. And I'm sure you all know that in business, that time is money. And the more time that your accountant has to spend doing your end of year accounts, doing your reporting and everything, and the less like organized it is and the messy the file is and the information that you give them isn't all together, the more expensive it's going to be. So you want to make sure it's all ready for your accountant. So today I'm going to be sharing my top tips after having many, many years working, having my own accountancy firm. So if you didn't know my past life, before I created my new business, I was actually the partner of a small boutique accounting firm here on the Gold Coast. And you know, the clients that were organized, the clients that were prepared, they really did get a much better deal. It was the ones that wasted our time, that weren't organized, that had all their information in a mess, was what, you know, when their fees ended up costing more money, because it took my time and my team's time a lot more to actually get it organized and get it all finalized. So today I want to share with you my top tips. Comment below. I'd love to know what you take away from this live webinar today, or what strategies you're going to use in future to help you prepare, and if it's useful. And also I'd love to hear back from you around different topics you'd like me to share about. So let me know if there's any certain topics you'd love more information on, and I can share that with you. Also, just wanted to say I have a podcast. If you haven't listened to it before, it's called Profit to Cash. I'll get Jessie to share the link below so that you can. Terrible on Zoom, you can see yourself. I'll get him to share the link below, because I've got a competition. So I mentioned it last time when I did the webinar with Carlo, that I've got a competition for my podcast. So there's only 4 things you need to do. It's super easy to enter. 1 is to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcast. 2 is to leave me a review on Apple Podcast. 3 is to share it with all your business besties. And 4 is to just send me a quick email and say you've done tick, 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 and give me some feedback. I'd love to hear from you about around that. And I'm going to be drawing that Apple Watch on the 30th of June. Now, listen up. Not many people have entered it to date. So if you want to enter it, make sure you do those 4 things. It's super easy. It's going to take you no more than 5 minutes of your time, and you've got a very good chance of winning an Apple Watch, because no one else has entered it yet. I haven't received any emails from anyone else about wanting to win this Apple Watch. So make sure you do those 4 things. 1, subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcast, or you can do it on Spotify, either one, Spotify or Apple Podcast. Leave me a review on the podcast on either Apple Podcast or Spotify. Share it with your business besties. And 4, send me a quick email. Let me know you've done all that. And I'm going to be drawing it live in the Facebook group, Business Mastery Secrets, where you're watching this video, on the 30th of June. As I mentioned, I'm an accountant, and it's an exciting day for us accountants. So I thought, why not celebrate the day with you by drawing my watch, the Apple Watch, on that day? So super simple and easy to enter. Make sure you do it. Don't miss out on winning that Apple Watch, because as I mentioned, no one to date has sent me an email. So you potentially, if you do it, you could potentially be the only person entering. Okay, so let's dive in today. End of financial year. It's rapidly approaching. As I mentioned, it's one of my exciting times of the year, and it's a really great time of year to start doing some review and reflection on what's happened. And also getting prepared for the end of financial year. So I'm just going to start sharing my top tips. So number 1, When you get started in business, I know sometimes when you're a smaller business and you're just getting started, you don't necessarily want to incur extra expenses. But one of the first things I think you should start looking at and investing in is some accounting software. So there's so many great options out there these days. They're relatively cheap. And they're all on, most of them are online. So you can link your bank account to it. It'll automatically download bank transactions into the accounting software. And it's easy for you to learn how to reconcile it. So my personal favorite is Xero. If you talk to your accountant or your bookkeeper, you can actually get what's called a Xero GST free cash book if you're not registered for GST yet, or a Xero GST cash book. So if you don't need it for invoicing and you don't need to use the software yet for putting in your bills and things like that, you can get a GST free cash book or a GST cash book for Xero, and they're relatively cheap. They're like $10 for the GST free one, or maybe $11, and like 20 something dollars, in $21, $22. So, but you need to get those through your bookkeeper and accountant. You can't just get them from the website. And then it goes, the versions that you can get online off the website are start at about $50 for the smaller package, and go up depending on how much capability you want and how many employees you've got, etc. But really good. The first thing I highly recommend, you can use an Excel spreadsheet, you can just use your bank account, but it just helps you save time and money. Time especially. It saves you a lot of time if you've got it online on a software package like Xero, QuickBooks, MyOb, Reckon, I think they're now called QuickBooks, but something similar to that, whatever you prefer. I personally love Xero. I think it's a really user-friendly software package to use. It links in with so many other applications. So you can connect it to like CRMs. You can have it set up with Stripe so that you can take credit card payments for your invoices. So all those good things. It helps keep everything in the one place. It keeps it all tidy. And as I've mentioned before, make sure you keep everything separate. So even if you're a sole trader, make sure you set up some business bank accounts that are separate from your personal bank accounts. And that also helps you to save a lot of time when it comes to reconciling your business accounts. Because if you've got all this messy transactions in there that don't really relate to your business, then I'd highly recommend making sure that you keep bank accounts separate. And when you set up your Xero file or your accounting software file, you just have those business bank accounts linked to your accounting software. I used to do bookkeeping, and it would drive me crazy when I'd have people that would have personal credit cards in their Xero file, and you'd be reconciling, there'd be all these messy transactions. So that helps you to save a lot of time. And also when it comes to, if you're starting to outsource your bookkeeping, it saves you a lot of time with your bookkeeper, because they're not having to sift through all these transactions that aren't relevant to your business. I recommend that you actually pay yourself money out of your business. Even if you are a sole trader, you can't necessarily treat it as wages, but I recommend that you actually set up a payment to yourself either weekly or fortnightly, as if you were paying yourself wages, and use that money that you pay to yourself into your personal bank account for personal expenses, not for business. So keep it separate, everyone. This is going to save you so much time, so much money, and it's just going to keep it so much neater. I can't stress this enough. This is my number one tip. Number two is make sure you have a system to keep all of your records, all your business records. So all of the tax invoices for expenses. If you buy, like for example, if you buy a new car and you're going to claim that in your business, you want to make sure you got the tax invoice for the car. You also want to make sure you got the car, if you borrow money to buy the car, that you've got all the loan agreements. Also, if you set up your business in a certain structure, so for example, if you have a company or you have a trust, you want to make sure you've got all of those legal documents also saved somewhere secure. I have hard copies of my trust documents, and I've also got them saved on my computer. I have under my business and finance folder on my computer, I've got a permanent folder, and in there I save all my permanent documents. I also save things like if I do buy an asset. So for example, if I was to buy a new car and I borrowed money, I would save that also in more of a permanent folder, because that's something that's going to go over many years. But then for my actual tax invoices, I save all of those relevant to the year. So 2022, I've got a folder on my computer called 2022. And underneath that folder, so inside that folder, I've actually got every month separated. And I save the invoice in the month they actually pay it. So I have an electronic copy of it online. And I've also got that in my emails. So my emails, when I receive an email that's a tax invoice, something like that, I save it straight to a tax folder on my email system and relevant to the year that I paid it. So it's a really great way, making sure you've got everything in there. People do scan and save it to their accounting software. I don't personally do that. I think it's an extra step that you don't necessarily need to do. And also the only other thing too is if you were to cancel your subscription to, like, say you use Xero, for example, and you cancel your subscription, then you might not have, so just checking there's no questions. If you cancel your subscription and it's shut down, then you don't have access to those invoices anymore. So I highly recommend having them separate from the accounting software. That's my personal preference. And then if your accountant does ask, or your bookkeeper asks to see anything, you can easily just email it to them because you know where it's saved on your computer. These days, most people have a smartphone in their pocket, and you can easily, there's apps that you can get that you can take photos of your receipts and save them as a PDF. You can also just use your camera and save it as a PNG file, but just make sure that when you email it, because I then email it to myself so I can save it on my computer in the right folder, make sure that you can actually read it, because sometimes what I've had happen with me, especially with clients, they've emailed me copies of their receipts, but when they've taken the picture on their phone and then emailed it to me, it hasn't been in the right size and I haven't been able to read it. It's been really blurry and ineligible. So just make sure that you do send it to yourself in the right size. I always say just send actual size. Don't change it to small, medium or large or whatever it is on your phone. Just save it as actual size so you can read it. So making sure you've got everything together. And at the end of the year, if your accountant asks you for things or your bookkeeper asks you things, you've got it easily accessible. It's going to save you a lot of time too, rather than trying to sift through lots of bits of paperwork and things are missing and you don't have records of things. And if you're ever audited by the ATO, once again, it's really easy for you to get all that information out, and there's no chance for you to be audited by the ATO. Okay, so does your accountant have a checklist? So when I used to have the accounting firm, we actually had a checklist, and then we actually, so we had standard checklists, but then we used to amend them every year relevant to our particular client and save the checklist relevant to that particular client. So for example, if one of our clients had an investment property, we would actually put the checklist for the investment property into their folder on our computer. And then if they had like shares or they had superannuation fund or whatever else that was unique to that client, we actually had a checklist that was specific to the client. So does your accountant have a checklist? Give them a call, ask them, just say, I'm looking to get a checklist so that I can get all my information together, collated for you so that I can bring it all in at the same time, rather than you having to pick up the phone and ring me because bits of pieces of paper are missing. And then you can, then once your accountant gives you that checklist, it's really simple for you just to, at the end of financial year, go through and check everything off and make sure you've got all the paperwork ready, and then you can send it all in together to your accountant. This is going to save you so much money because the accountant's then going to get all the information at the same time, and they're not going to be picking up and putting it down and picking it up and putting it down. Because what used to happen was we'd get work in from a client, we'd start the job, we'd get halfway through it and we'd realize, oh, we're missing a bank statement. So then we'd go back to the client and say, well, we're actually missing this bank statement. Then we'd start again. And then we'd get halfway through and we'd be like, oh no, now we're missing share statements for the dividends. So we'd have to call them up and ask for the dividends. But if you actually got a checklist from the accountant prior to the end of the financial year, and you go through it item by item and check everything off and make sure it's all there before you give it to your accountant, it's going to save you so much money with the accountant's fees. And talk to them about that. Say, look, I've got this checklist. I've got everything there. I know last year it probably took you a lot longer because you had to come back and forth. Is there a chance that, if I prepare it all properly for you and give it to you, that my accounting fees might be a little bit less this year if it doesn't take you as much time? So ask them, just check in with them. So do they have a specific checklist just for you and your file, or couldn't they give you just a checklist regardless of that, whether it's specific or not? So I'm just going to check Facebook and make sure there's nope, no one's asked any questions. So if you've got a question, post it under the video. I can't see it, so I've just got to jump into Facebook every now and again and check. So if you have got any questions about anything I'm sharing today, make sure you comment below and let me know. And I'd love to know if you're listening to this live or you're watching to the replay, where you're watching from. Comment as well. I'd love to know all of that. Okay, so number 4. With your accounting file, making sure with your business accounting file, so your, like, say, Xero or QuickBooks or Marble, whatever you use, making sure it's all reconciled correctly. So make sure that your bank accounts reconcile to the actual bank statements. So this is really important. So check 30 June what the bank balance was in the bank account. So actually log into your internet banking, have a look at the 30 June balance, and then check that against your actual accounting, you know, your Xero or QuickBooks or MyBook, whatever you use. Make sure they reconcile and they agree. And that's number one. Then also going through your balance sheet accounts, balance sheet. So you've got like your accounts receivable. So who owes you money, making sure that's all correct and that reconciles. Accounts payable, making sure that, yeah, all of that's reconciling and is correct as well. This is just going to save time. If you're not quite sure how to do all of this, ask your bookkeeper, or maybe get a bookkeeper to help you go through this, because it will probably be cheaper to do it with your bookkeeper than it will be the accountant. And if you can actually reconcile most of the things and then give it to your accountant, it's going to save them a lot of time too, because it means they don't have to go through and try and reconcile it. A big one that always seemed to get messy and didn't reconcile is the GST account. PAYG withholding payable, and also superannuation payable. So make sure that those three accounts reconcile. And as I mentioned, if you're not quite sure how to do that, then work with your bookkeeper and go through that and just make sure all of those accounts are reconciling. So yeah, so that's making sure your accounts reconcile. Work with your bookkeeper, get all of your accounts up to date and reconciling and making sure that everything's correct. I also recommend going through your general ledger for your income and expense accounts especially, and just making sure that they all appear correct, so that things are being coded to the actual correct account, that you don't have, you know, like motor vehicle expenses sitting in insurance, for example, or you don't have advertising expenses sitting in membership fees, or vice, you know, whatever it is, just making sure that everything appears to have been reconciled correctly and in the right count. And that will also save time with your accountant, because they will go through your general ledger and they'll check to see that everything appears to be in the correct account, is actually deductible and claimable, and what it actually is. So making sure you haven't put anything personal into those accounts as well, because as I mentioned, your accountant's going to go through that and they will query certain things to make sure it's correct. So making sure your balance sheet accounts reconcile, and also going through your general ledger report and making sure that everything appears correct there. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about here and you'd love for me to do a bit more of a deep dive into any of those topics that I've just discussed, then let me know. So if you want more information about the balance sheet and what that actually is, I'm more than happy to do a session here around your balance sheet. It's a really important report that often gets overlooked. So if you're not sure about the balance sheet and you'd like some more information, let me know. Also, your general ledger, that's a really powerful report to review, and I recommend doing it on a monthly basis, just making sure that everything's correct and you haven't got anything coded incorrectly, or even just to find out if there's any money leaks in your business is really great to do that. So if you'd like me to do any more training around those two specific topics, then let me know. So number 5 is changes to assets. So have you bought or sold any assets during the year? So if you've, for example, you sold your motor vehicle and you've bought a motor vehicle, make sure you've got all the documentation that relates to those transactions, because your accountant definitely is going to need them and they're going to wanting to review them at end of financial year. So you want to make sure that you provide all that information. If you've got investments such as like an investment property, if you bought a new investment property during the year, or you sold an investment property, or you bought or sold shares or any other kind of assets, making sure you have all of that information as well and give it to your accountant, because they're going to need to know that information, and it gets reported to the ATO as well. So if the accountant doesn't receive that information, they're going to have to ask you, and if it gets missed and you haven't provided it and the actual information gets missed, it will then potentially set off a flag with the ATO and they might do a review. So the ATO tax office, I mean there. So if anyone's wondering what ATO is, sorry, I'm using acronyms, but the tax office. So the tax office will question it. Now I've got this hair sticking up. Sorry, everyone, it's driving me crazy. There we go. Okay, number 6 is know what tax deductions you're able to claim. So it's really important to make sure you know what you can and can't claim as a tax deduction. That makes sure that you're not missing out on any expenses that you possibly can claim to reduce your taxable income. So business, I know, for example, due to the fact that we had COVID and a lot more people were working from home, the way you can claim your home business expenses has changed. So maybe check into that. Ask your accountant if there's anything new this year that you should be aware of, any changes to the tax law. I know in the budget there was some changes to how you can claim investments, I think, into like technology type platforms, and also training for your staff, your team members. So just check with your accountant if there's anything like that that you can benefit from, or there's anything you really should be aware of, and making sure that you put through all the deductions you possibly can claim at 30 June and don't miss out on anything, because that is definitely going to save you money, and not time necessarily, but definitely money. And you want to be able to make sure that you get the full benefit of all the expenses you can claim. So I see sometimes people pay, like for example, if you work from home like I do, I claim internet in my business, but some of it is personal, but some of it, majority of it I use for business. So I put the majority of it through my business because it is a business deduction. And I see some people paying the internet with a personal account and then they forget to take it up in their business account. So just make sure you do that. And have a chat to your accountant, as I mentioned, because they'll be able to let you know if there's anything specific that you should be able to claim with your business that you potentially aren't putting through at this stage. So make sure you claim all of your tax deductions. Okay, number 7, provide all of your income details to your accountant. So don't miss out on anything. Like, did you work, for example, like you might have a business, but did you do some work like through a different ABN, or did you actually have a job for a period of time? Do you have interest income on any of your, even personal bank accounts? Do you have dividends? All sorts of income, making sure that you account for all of it and you provide all that information to your accountant. Most of it these days is actually reported to the ATO, to the tax office, but you just want to make sure that you provide all of that information to the accountant. Also, another thing is cash. So if you have a business where you're accepting cash payments, that's still income that should be taken up as business income, for example, because it actually is genuine income. And what the ATO or the tax office can actually do is they can do audits based on benchmarks. So they've got small business benchmarks that they use, and they've analyzed hundreds of thousands of businesses in certain industries, and they've got average benchmarks that they use, and they apply those to your the reports that are lodged with the ATO, your tax return. And if they don't stack up, if you're like out of the outside their KPIs or whatever they've got, outside the averages for your industry and your business size, then they're potentially going to do an audit on that, and that will set off flags with the ATO. So just make sure that you really are accounting for all your income and you're not missing anything, because you don't want a situation where you're audited by the tax office. Number 8 is paying your superannuation on time. So it has to be in the superannuation bank account by 30 June. So if you're wanting to prepay your staff's super, so for example, sometimes, April, May, June, superannuation is not legally required to be paid till the 28th of July. But if you're wanting to claim it in the current financial year, then make sure that you pay it before 30 June, because it actually has to go into the bank account of the super fund by 30 June. So if you do that and you want to claim a tax deduction, just make sure you pay it by the right date. And also, if you're wanting to pay superannuation for yourself personally, make sure that you pay your own personal superannuation before 30 June as well, and let your accountant know that you want to claim a tax deduction for that superannuation. So really important to pay your superannuation on time and you don't miss claiming that tax deduction. Number 9 is ensure that all your employee reporting is up to date. So at the end of the financial year, you need to get the employees' reports off to them or to the tax office, lodged with the tax office, because I'm sure most of your employees want to lodge their personal tax returns pretty quickly after the end of the financial year. So it's really important to make sure that all your payroll's done, everything's been reconciled, and you've lodged your end of year reports with the tax office as soon as possible, as soon as practical, so that your employees can get their tax returns done. This is going to save you time as well. And you also, you can get penalised by the tax office if you don't have it lodged by the due date. So just make sure that you get that all done and lodged on time for your employees. One last thing, number 10. So I know this is a bit of a long webinar today, but number 10 is plan for the coming financial year. So this time of year is a really, really great time to do a review of the financial year that's just been. So actually sit down and review your financials, have a look at what happened over the past financial year. Did you hit your goals? Did you hit your targets? What worked, what wouldn't work, what didn't work, what are you doing really well, what do you need to maybe tweak, get together with your team. It's a really great time for you to kind of have half a day or a full day with your team and just do a really big tidy up, review what's happened over the past financial year, and set your goals for the coming financial year. Like, what do you want to achieve going into 2023, the new financial year? What targets are you setting yourself? Who do you want to service? Who are your clients going to be? Do you want to take your business international? Do you want to be national? You know, what do you want to achieve? And a really great way to do that is actually coming along to my business planning workshop. So on the 22nd of June, it's going to be a full day in-person workshop here on the Gold Coast. I'm doing it at Quest Robina. It's a really, really good price. And I've got early bird to the 30th of May. And after that, it's going to go up to full price. So if you're interested, comment below or send me a message. There's already 5 people registered, and I'm going to cap it at a smaller number because I really want everyone to get really good value. It's fully catered, so it includes food. So come along and do a full plan. You're basically going to walk away with your very own one-page business plan to set you up for success for 2023. Now, this business plan, personally, I've started implementing it when I had the accounting firm, so probably in my early 30s, I think it was. So 10 years ago, I started implementing this plan. Now, up until that point, my accounting firm had, I felt really like I was reacting all the time. I didn't have any plan for the business. We didn't have any systems in place for our clients or our team. I'd come in every day. I was feeling overwhelmed. I was feeling stressed. I was basically just constantly putting out fires everywhere. And I just felt burnt out, frazzled, and just had no idea what was going on. But when I started doing this plan and really focusing in on what I needed to focus on over the next 90 days, it was a really great strategy because it really just helped me to turn my business around. I got really clear on what I wanted to achieve. I got really clear on what my key actions had to be for that 90 days. And I really focused on that to help me take my business to the next level. And literally by implementing this plan in my business, I was able to grow it to double in size over probably about 2 years. We did that. And then that enabled us to sell the business for a really good profit when the time was right. So highly recommend this workshop. It's an absolute bargain at the moment. So send me a message and let me know if you're interested, or comment below and let me know if you're interested. And I'd love to share that with you. It's going to be on the 22nd of June, a full day workshop. Take time out for yourself. If you want to bring a team member with you, if you've got a business partner, let me know and I can work out a special rate for you to bring them along. And it's going to be a fantastic workshop where you're going to get really clear on your 10-year, your 5-year, your 1 year, and your 90-day goals, all aligned to your vision and your purpose for your business. So if that sounds interesting to you, comment below. It is a fantastic workshop. And if you actually take the action and you implement this plan like I did in my own firm about 10 years ago, honestly, it can transform your business. If you take the action, it will absolutely transform your business. As I mentioned, my business was unorganized. I was constantly putting out fires. I felt really, really overwhelmed. I had no strategy. Customer service was terrible. There was no real business growth, and everything changed. Our business became systemized. We were able to start growing the firm. Customer satisfaction went through the roof. We were able to turn jobs around successfully really quickly. So I cannot recommend this workshop more highly. It had a huge, profound impact on myself and my business. And I just want to share that with as many people as I can. So come along to my business planning workshop on the 22nd of June. Send me a message, comment below, and also let me know if this workshop, this webinar has been useful, and if there's any other topics you'd like me to focus on in the coming months. I'm Phoebe Dre, the Cashflow Pocket Rocket. It's my absolute pleasure to share with you today. I hope you've enjoyed this Facebook Live, and I'll connect with you very, very soon.